Welcome back to Approved AF, the mortgage licensing podcast. Today we're diving into what it looks like to build a mortgage brokerage from the ground up. Our guest, Laiken Charles of Hobbs Mortgage Loans, LLC DBA Luma Lending, shares her journey from retail lending to becoming her own broker owner. If you've ever thought about taking the leap but felt the fear, this episode is for you. Let's jump in. Hi, Laiken. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
All right. So for those who might not know who you are or anything about your company, can you give us a quick introduction into who you are and a little bit more about Luma Lending?
Yeah, so my name is Laiken Charles. I got into the mortgage industry, I believe it was about 6 years ago this fall. Started in retail, had a great opportunity to join a small brokerage, and really just kind of fell in love with the broker side of things. Not that retail was bad. I worked with amazing people, met tons of really great people, some that I still talk to. And from there, I just kind of wanted to open my own brokerage. I always had a vision or, maybe like a dream, you would say, whenever I was younger, that I would work in marketing or public relations and, kind of work my way up to the top of a company and represent a company in that sense. But as I have gotten older and, my career kind of unfolded, I just saw a path to actually be my own business owner. So I just jumped on it and I could not be happier.
That's beautiful. For most of us in the mortgage space, it's not something that we, planned out at 7 and that was what we wanted to do. So take us a little bit through that journey of what brought you into the space and kind of where that leap of courage came from to start your own.
So whenever I graduated from Morehead State University, I had a bachelor's degree in communication and I knew it was broad and all, didn't really know what I wanted to do with it. But then I didn't know really what I wanted to do. So I was like, okay, I'll just get a master's degree, which I don't know looking back kind of what I was thinking. But my dad is actually still in the mortgage business. And he was like, please try it, give it a shot. I think you'll be really great at it. And I'm sure that most people could attest that working with family is super hard. One of the hardest things that I've probably ever done in my life. But that is kind of how I got started. Just got a really good opportunity to learn from his branch. So I just kind of fell in love with the business. I remember starting and thinking like, this is foreign language, but how cool is it that as an everyday person, there is a space or a route for you to be able to own your own home. So just kind of fell in love with the fact that the opportunity was there for people to become homeowners and that I could be a part of them becoming homeowners.
That's really awesome. It's very much like a service-minded heart that you have. And so after kind of moving through that space and kind of learning the ins and outs, what was the tipping point for you to decide that you wanted to start your own brokerage?
Yeah. So I remember growing up also, kind of touch on this. And I was never really great at like science. I can do the basic math because, that's what I do every day. Your multiplication, your division, all that good stuff. But I just kind of remember feeling, being in high school thinking like, what am I going to do with my life? Because I'm very much a people person. Like I want to help people. I want to make a difference. And growing up, I was like, I don't want to be a doctor or anything to do with medical. And I remember kind of just feeling that I wouldn't be able to like help people the way I wanted to. What I kind of dreamed about doing is just making a difference for people. And so whenever I got into the mortgage, space, realized that I could help people in a different capacity than maybe I realized whenever I was 17, 18 years old, or even, at 21. From there, I realized that I had enough experience and I knew enough that I could kind of come up with a plan and a vision for my own business in order to reach more people.
Absolutely. And was your family supportive of this decision?
Yeah, so I'm married and my husband was extremely supportive, which was great, which still is great because I really rely on him. He's like, Laiken, like you can do it. Because even right now, just starting out as a new broker, it's really hard. And I knew it would be hard, but he has been great, as my parents have too. My dad still operates under a different business, which it really worked out for both of us in the sense of like a business and family standpoint. So both of my parents were very supportive, as was my sister. And my sister recently graduated college in May. And she just recently joined as a loan officer assistant. And then she does our bookkeeping. So I have a really great inner circle of people who have been extremely supportive.
We love a supportive family, and double shout outs to supportive spouses.
Yes. Yeah, he's, because I mean, I'm not going to come on here and say it's been easy and, I haven't, shed a tear here and there. He's like, Laiken, you can do this. Like, I believe in you. Like, you have a vision, you know what you want to do. So I'm very thankful for supportive people, and I would not have made it this far without that.
Yes. So kind of going off of that, what has been some of the biggest emotions that you felt during the transition of, deciding to launch your own company?
Well, it was definitely a lot of fear, and it still is, because I have worked, a W-2 income job since I have been 16 years old. So I started working at, I don't know if you remember Justice, like Limited to the oldest. Yeah. I started working at Justice like the day after I turned 16. So, and then whenever I was in college, I still worked on campus. So I have pretty much, consistently had a paycheck since I have been 16 years old. And now I'm 30 years old, and just starting out, that's not necessarily the case. So it has been very fearful, but at the same time, it's been rewarding. And I look back on, where I started, last October, and almost a year later, I'm where I thought I would be, a year ago. So definitely fear, definitely rewarding. And I did bring on a team with me. So I still had a team at my previous company, but also working with the team that has transferred over with me, and like, hearing their thoughts and essentially like helping them grow as individuals in the mortgage space has also been rewarding. So I know I keep going back to rewarding, but a lot of reward and a lot of fear.
Sometimes moving in that unknown is extremely scary, but once you kind of find that footing, you're like, okay, I can take the next best step. I don't know if I just quoted Frozen 2 on that one, but
Right.
we're here for it.
Whenever you asked me to join, I was like, I'm a pretty straightforward person. So I'm not going to come on this podcast and tell everybody, it's been rainbows and butterflies, because it has been great, but it's trials and tribulations as you become your own business owner. But you just have to kind of bet on yourself and see your vision through. And I feel like that's kind of where I'm at. And I might be kind of faking it until I make it right now, but I'm super excited. But it's been a journey, but I know that it's going to continue to get better from here.
What was the first step that you took when you decided to kind of go for it? What was that conversation like with your husband or, business partners or anybody in that decision-making space for you?
Yeah. So I'm actually the 100% business owner. So it really was just kind of me and my husband to start out, because, we have a home and a life and, all of our joint finances together. And I was like, this is going to change things. It's going to take an investment to start, those type of things. But he was extremely supportive, like I'd said, and he always believed in me to do it. So there was really no pushback or hesitation. He just said, if this is what you feel like is best for you and your business and our family, I 110% support it. So that's kind of just the first step, was having that initial conversation. And then I know that people might listen to this and think that, I'm just saying this. But from there, I went to one of the account executives and I kind of gave him the rundown of what I was thinking, kind of what I wanted to do from here. And he was actually like, you need to get in touch with the licensing store. But so that really was my next step because I know the mortgage laws and I know what I had to know just to even get a mortgage license. So I knew that it's not that I didn't believe in myself, but there was just no way I could have handled like the compliance and the licensing and knowing where to start without, taking up my whole time trying to study and learn it while also still originating loans. So, talking with my husband and getting like the compliance and the licensing and knowing what I needed to do first were, I wouldn't call them step 1 and 2. I feel like those were, both one step in itself.
And, obviously this podcast is backed by Licensing Store. I work for a licensing store. You are a client of Licensing Store. But in that transition, did that feel like it kind of took some of that pressure off of your shoulders to kind of give you back some mental space? Or, again, this is the honest truth in your journey because everybody's different, but did that still, make you toss and turn at night because of all the still variables that kind of go into the business aspects?
I'm naturally an anxious person. So yes, but I also had done my research and knew that I was in good hands. So I felt comfortable with, the help I had and, hiring out the licensing store to get started. But, any step that you take where you're completely changing your norm is going to make you toss and turn at night. So I did struggle at first to put my trust in other people because so much of my business, the past 6 years in the mortgage industry, I've kind of relied on myself. So turning over, I guess, I don't want to say like ownership of my business, but kind of turning over some of the control, it was really nerve-wracking for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, 100%. And honestly, we appreciate your feedback on that too, because this is what this podcast is designed to do, is to tell people, your stories and your guys' strategies. So in that, we are in the mortgage industry and it is still very male dominated in the space. What has your experience as a woman, as a business owner, and as a leader been?
I think that it's just important that no matter, what sex an individual is, not everybody's going to support you. So you may come out as a new broker and think that, all these realtors or all these, people that you've worked with throughout the years are still going to support you. And I think that was one of the, kind of, I don't want to say like a slap in the face, but I try to support everybody. Like I want everybody to succeed. And I knew that as just being a loan officer, that wasn't the case. But I guess in my mind, I thought, this is like such a huge step. I feel like I'll get a lot of support. And so, you're not always going to get the support that you think that you're going to get. And that's okay. But even just, being in a space that is male dominated, you always just have to remember that it doesn't matter if you're a male or a female. It really matters how you treat people and how good you are to your clients and at your job. So if somebody of the opposite sex is treating you differently, that's really not on you. That's on them. And, that's kind of what I try to hold on to because at my heart, I am sensitive and, I want everybody to succeed and I want people to feel that way about me too. But sadly, that's just really not how life works.
Yeah, no, that's very true. It's important to remember that, some of these things we can control and that's our piece of the pie. But things when let that be for them to deal with. That's a reflection of them and not a reflection of you.
Right. And, I have been told before, like, you're piggybacking off your dad's name. That has verbatim been said to me in the past 6 months. But again, that's a reflection on them and not on me. And there is times where I think to myself, somebody wouldn't be saying this to me if I were a man, essentially. I mean, that's just the God's honest truth and how I feel. But I just try to not hold on to it, because if I'm sitting here taking up all this negative space in my mind with people saying things that are a reflection of them, not me, then it's really going to take away from my business and my goals and my vision. And I've really put in way too much hard work at this point, and way too much capital and way too much stress to worry, you know what I mean, about people who think badly of me whenever I haven't given them, a reason, essentially.
Yeah, not letting that imposter syndrome win. Like, you feel like you have 2 feet to stand on in this space because you've worked it.
Right. And my husband he always makes fun of me. He doesn't make fun of me. He's like, because, I'm like 5'9". He's like, why do you wear heels? And because I'll wear 3 or 4 inch heels because, then I'll be like 6'2". And I'm like, well, everybody else that, is a loan officer is that tall. So he always thinks that's so funny. But I mean, you just got to do what you got to do to make yourself feel better. And I don't want to say like fight for a space you belong in, but, people aren't going to treat you equally, and you just still have to keep showing up.
Yeah, do the best that you can do with what you got.
Yeah. And I feel like when I talk about it, I sound like really confident, but it is really hard, and I have shed some tears over it. So I think it's okay to feel what you feel, but also, kind of give yourself that confidence back, have that conversation with yourself. And again, just keep moving forward, because you have clients and a business to run and employees who are relying on you.
Mm-hmm. So when you are facing those challenges and resistance from others, how do you give yourself that pep talk, or how do you overcome that in those moments?
I know it sounds crazy, but actually it probably really doesn't sound that crazy now that I say it, but exercise and putting up my computer and just going outside and, just getting some fresh air. So exercise and being outside have helped me way more than I ever would have imagined over the past 6 months. I'm really glad it's starting to cool down in Kentucky, because the past few mornings have been amazing. But just trying to like stay active and not have every single thought be about work, and going outside and getting some air and exercise for sure.
Sometimes turning off that work brain is so hard to do, but it is essential so that you don't burn yourself out.
Yeah, absolutely. And, even when I am exercising, there's definitely a thought coming through like, oh, what about this file, or what about that? But also, trying to direct my mind to, not being about work, and also kind of prioritizing myself, which is not something I've done really great at over the past 5 or 6 years. So I know that to be, the best owner, I essentially have to be the best version of myself. So I know that's kind of cliche, but kind of just relying on those type of things and, controlling my thoughts has definitely been very beneficial for me.
That's awesome. What do you think women bring to leadership in mortgage that's powerful and unique?
I think that women bring a multiple standpoint approach, and definitely some empathy. So I think sometimes that women business leaders can, maybe think, I don't want to say think more complex, because that doesn't mean that a male business leader can't, but, kind of just different perspectives, taking in some of the emotion of the decision making and figuring out how we can take that emotion out of decision making as well. So I don't know if that sounds weird, but that's something that I've really tried to focus on is, if an error has been made, why was this error made? And then trying to go back and, see how much of that emotion made that error and how we can control that emotion to not make that error again. So I feel like I'm like talking in a circle, but
No, that's insightful.
Those type of things are, what I kind of look at, because I think the fact of the matter is women are emotional. It doesn't mean that men aren't, but sometimes women business leaders do tend to be a little more emotional in my experience, because that is who I am. But I think also realizing who you are and what your strengths and weaknesses are and how to better yourself also makes you a better business leader. And sometimes women can maybe do that a little bit better than men. Not all, but some.
More self-aware. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that would be the best word for the long explanation.
Well, I think empathy is a very strong word that is something that maybe we don't value as much in a business transaction. But for your particular space of, potentially first-time home buyers or any home purchase, actually, it's a huge change in someone's life, and empathy can go a long way to make that a relational transaction and not just a business transaction.
Right. And I mean, overall, I feel like out of all the largest financial transactions you're going to make, home buying is going to have probably the most emotion. And then you throw in the fact, that when it comes to home buying, a lot of times, not always, you are buying a home because somebody in your family has passed, your family has grown, somebody is getting divorced. You may be taking on a non-traditional family approach, which is something I see a lot. So it is an emotional transaction. And I think that we all should be aware of our emotions and how to control those, but also how much of a role they play in the home buying process and also the decision making.
Mm-hmm. So for women listening who have this dream about being in a leadership role or even opening and starting their own business, what is your biggest piece of advice or encouragement that you would share with them?
You got to believe in yourself and you got to believe that you can do it, because if you don't believe that you can do it, then how are you going to, I don't want to say convince, but how are other people going to think that you can do it if you don't think you can do it yourself? So you just have to bet on yourself. You have to have a plan. I think that's the most important. You have to have some support, whether it be, in your family aspect, but also in the situation where the licensing store came in. I have a really great CPA. I have a really great financial advisor. So I think surrounding yourself with people who believe in you and have your best interest in mind is also very much the key to succeeding in doing it. But if you're thinking about doing it, you should just go for it, because we all fail in life, but you will be able to pivot and you will be able to figure it out if you just think that you can.
Mm-hmm. What would you say was like the smartest decision that you made early on that you feel like set you up for success?
The smartest decision, which I think that's an interesting question, because I think I made some good decisions and I think I made, maybe some not as great ones. I think that when it came to the capital to start the business, I actually did a home equity line of credit on my home. So I think it's, it kind of speaks volume that, I'm a mortgage broker. My world very much is a mortgage centric, but also to get where I have gotten, I essentially used home ownership, in order to excel. So I know that that may not be applicable to everybody, but, kind of making those financial decisions before taking like a big leap of faith and essentially not having a paycheck was pretty important.
So we talked about partnering with licensing store and your AE's support in that transition over in that direction. But what was your mindset surrounding your licensing growth and how you wanted to position your company?
I knew that I didn't want to get started and, me trying to figure it out myself, because one thing I really focused on is I wanted to really lean into what I was good at as I created a business. And I knew that was originating. What I know that I'm okay at, but not great at, is, the financial advising piece or the bookkeeping piece or, the CPA. And in this case, the licensing piece. I still do not log into the MLS unless I absolutely have to. And I was joking that I should be the poster child for somebody who needs the help of the licensing store, because, you get into the NMLS website and you think that you do something right. For example, I went in there and updated my email address, but little did I know it needed updated like 8 other places. So, yeah.
Yeah. And again, that's if you're not in it every day, it can get cumbersome. So, having somebody who's in it day in and day out, that becomes very helpful.
Yeah. Or when my address needed updated and she was like, this has to be updated 18 places. So I just don't have the patience, and that would take away from, my goals and what it is I'm setting out to do as a mortgage broker. So relying on those people who, I don't want to say know more than you, but essentially know more than you in that sense, is really important in being successful, in my opinion.
And what strategies have you implemented to help you grow the right team?
So I know we briefly talked about how I brought over, I had a loan officer assistant and then another loan officer. They've been with me for 3 or 4 years. And then my sister, Charlie, is also a loan officer assistant. We're kind of teaching her the ropes. But as far as strategy, we are heavily focusing on communication because, at some point, we all across the nation as loan officers, the loan products, there are some unique ones, but vastly speaking, loan products are loan products. There's some great ones out there. Maybe a bank has something more specific, or, this broker has access to, whatever it may be. But really setting yourself apart comes from communication and making sure that, your borrowers feel comfortable and that they trust you. So that relationship piece also comes from communication. So really knowing that those 3 women and then, whoever we hire in the future also value that communication piece is super important to me, because we want to build lasting relationships and we want to make people feel comfortable in the process because it's emotional. So that's kind of what we're focusing on. And we all have, that kind of same mindset moving forward, that we want to grow and we want to be better. So knowing that we work together as a team in that sense and have a clear vision has been essential. And we kind of also all built what we wanted Luma Lending to look like up front. So, I am the 100% owner, but going back and forth with them, like, what do you think about, this mission statement? Or what do you think about, whatever piece of communication or marketing? So kind of all putting our ideas together and creating something, bigger than ourselves that we're super proud of.
That's awesome. Yeah, communication is such a big piece of the puzzle. And having a united vision when you are growing your team is very important too.
And that's all we talked about, up front. Like, hey, if you don't, if we're not on the same page about this procedure or what we're going to do in this instance or what it looks like from start to finish on a home buying transaction, how are we going to build trust within our communities if we're not even trusting ourselves or trusting one another? So I also never want to sell like a mission or a company that doesn't do what it says it does. So knowing that we're all together as one, and that it's been really rewarding, and I'm super excited. I can't wait to see where we go in at least a few years, at least.
I can't wait to see where you guys go too. If you could go back to your early days as a loan origination or even just starting the company, is there something that you wish you would have done differently?
I feel like it's the cliche answer, but I don't wish that I would have done anything differently, because I feel like, I'm a human. I've made plenty of mistakes over time, even if it's just, learning something with an origination or guideline. But usually once you make that mistake, you learn from it forever. So I don't want to say I wish I would have done anything different. I've always tried to, treat people right and, be good to people. And I feel like that's probably the most important thing to me that I've done, but also learning from the mistakes or, even the miscommunications I've made have made me a better business owner and, mortgage broker itself.
Yeah. And keeping an open mind as you're experiencing those things to learn and grow from them is so important as well.
Yeah. And sometimes it's really hard to say, like, hey, I made an error, but sometimes you just have to own it. And long term, people will trust you more whenever you hold yourself accountable and you're honest. So we haven't really talked much about honesty, but that's been another big piece of what I've been trying to build as a business, because I want, people to trust me. So you can't be trustworthy if you're not honest.
100%.
It is what it is. I mean, and it sucks. Sometimes it really does suck to, look at a realtor or, look at a borrower and say, like, hey, I made an error. But, sometimes we just have to realize we're human and we're not computers. And again, I know that's cliche, but that's kind of what I've held on to, to get through those moments whenever it does feel, it does suck. It doesn't feel great. But that all comes with personal growth, I guess.
100%. So how do you balance the role of CEO while actually still, running a business and originating?
I'm so glad you asked that, because I know we briefly talked about, or I briefly had said, like, leaning into my strengths. But I was in a coaching program and it was really heavily emphasized on, look at what your strengths are. We had done the Clifton's test. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
Yeah, super great. I'll have to send you some information on it because it's great for any team. But looking into, what you're great at and kind of hiring everything out that you're not, or, kind of reassigning those type of things. So for me, it is, the communication, the originating, those type of things. But we have signed up with a third-party processor. So we'll, have that piece. We have a really great CPA that I trust. We source out the things that maybe aren't our strengths. So we use a third-party processor, because what they are good at is processing the loan, tracking down the documents, making sure the appraisal and title work come in on time. Or, if there's issues, which it's not that necessarily I'm bad at that, or, we as a company are bad at that. But if we can lean into our strengths, the communication, the origination, the building relationships, and focus on that, that allows me to still be a CEO, but still also do what I love. So in addition to that, kind of sourcing out, has a great CPA, a great financial advisor, but also focusing on what I am good at, and trusting those who are also good at what they do, I guess is a great way to put it.
Yeah, partnering with the right people so that you have, a full-fledged team of people that can excel in those various areas, allowing you to excel in what you're great at.
Right. And, even with the licensing store, I don't think that I could be a full, CEO or mortgage broker if I'm sitting here worried about whenever, this piece of paperwork is due, or, if I'm meeting whatever deadline I have to meet. So having, you know what I mean? Again, somebody else who specializes in that allows me to still do what I want to do and helps me be able to also have a life. Because I would be working 24/7, and that's not good for me, and that's not good for a business. Anyways, how is that going to be a sustainable business long term?
Mm-hmm. What mindset shifts have you found that are important to you as a business owner?
As a business owner, taking care of myself. I have to, have some time to myself, some time to exercise, have dinner with friends, step away from my laptop. So I think I used to be so more about, like, I've got to get this loan, or, I've got to sell, I've got to, keep going and get more and more and more, which I still am like that in some aspects, but also realizing I also need a break and time, you know what I mean? To be just me, not a mortgage broker or not a mortgage originator too. So I've really kind of shifted into taking care of myself better, which it really shouldn't take opening a business to do that, but we won't go down that road. Taking care of myself, making sure I have time, and simply just stepping away for a little bit, clearing my mind out.
It sounds like you not only invested in your business, but you invested in yourself, and that will in turn invest in the systems to help you, keep this business running, for the long term and not just a short fuse.
Right. And I mean, if I'm taking better care of myself, I can also take better care of the employees, and pour back into them because I don't know that I hear this very often, but one of my main goals in being a business owner is I want my employees to like working for me. You know what I mean? I want to be approachable. I want them to want to continue to work at Luma Lending. I don't want to pour all this time in them and then them go, somewhere else to work.
Yeah.
So I know that I have to take care of myself and be, my mental clarity, be there and, be sane essentially in order, to be the best employer, not
Yes.
a business owner.
How do you define success for yourself and for the business?
How do I define success for myself and my business? You would think that would be an easy question to answer, but I think the first thing that comes to my mind is being happy because you don't want to wake up and go to work every day and be miserable. So I think being successful, it is in the numbers. It is in, how many, I don't want to say how many loans you close, but how many people, I guess, are happy with you at the end of a loan, want to do another transaction. So you do have those things to consider, the numbers and all that, but also just being happy and wanting to continue to, to run a business and work in the mortgage world.
I like that.
Yeah.
Because you're right. It's not just about the numbers. There's this like emotional aspect of the measurement factor.
I know people are going to listen and be like, this woman is so emotional. And that's not necessarily the case. But you just have to consider those type of things whenever you think beyond the numbers, because for me, I think what it all goes back to is anybody who does a job or, runs a business, they want to have, they want the revenue in order to live because that's what you need in the world. But at the end of the day, for me, I just want to be happy. I want the employees to be happy and I want to do things right so that, the consumers that we get to work with who turn into clients are also happy. And you can't really talk about, wanting to be happy without considering the emotions of everything involved in a mortgage transaction.
So kind of in that mindset and growth space, is there something, I know you've mentioned a couple of like courses that you've taken and, things like that, but is there something that you've done or a book that you've read that you would strongly recommend to other women out there who are thinking about entering into the space?
There's not a certain book, for that I've read that I would think about, recommending to women. There is a book that comes to mind. Have you ever heard of the book Surrounded by Idiots?
I don't think so.
I don't know the author off the top of my head. That is a really good one in the sense of it talks about, personality types and communication and how maybe sometimes you may think a certain way because you have what they call a red personality. Well, I'm more of a yellow personality, so I think of it X, Y, and Z, while you think of the situation as A, B, and C. So that is just kind of a book in general that I would recommend. And when it comes to like women in the space, men tend to be, different, a certain genre of colors, I guess, because there's actually 4: red, blue, green, and yellow. So knowing that maybe somebody isn't coming off the way you think they are, it's more of a personality difference. I think that was a really good one for me. I'll have to send you the author of that to share with everybody.
Yeah, definitely. We'll link that in the show notes, guys.
Okay. That's a great one.
And then what's one action step someone listening today could take if they're ready to stop waiting and they're ready to start building their own company?
I just want to say put one step forward because I think that's the only option. If you want to get, where you want to be, just go out there and do it. Of course, if you have questions, I think it's important to try to get in a space, whether it be some type of coaching or, like getting with the licensing store. get into a space or with people who know more than you do. And I think that's okay to say, you're never going to know everything. So kind of relying on those who know more than you and asking those questions, why, is the only way, to continuously keep moving forward. And you just got to go for it, because if you're not going to go for it, somebody else out there will, and we're all going to fail along the way. But again, as long as you, essentially get back up and pivot forward, it's really not failure. You're just learning.
Yes. Did you learn something from it? Because then it's not failure.
Right. Absolutely. And I feel like it's cliche. I feel like I'm saying so many cliche things. That's not what I'm trying to do. Like, it is coming from the heart. But I mean, you're never going to learn if you don't fail. And I mean, I'm a perfectionist. I don't like to fail. It sucks, but it is part of learning. And that's the only way you're ever really going to grow.
Yeah, 100%. I literally just had this conversation with my youngest kid over math problems. And I'm like, buddy, we don't ask you to be perfect. We just ask you to give your best effort, because it's in the moments where you don't get it right where you learn the most.
Right. And I think that's even a good point for somebody wanting to start a business. Don't put so much pressure on yourself, which I feel wrong to even say that, because I put more pressure on myself than any human that I know. But, you're going to fail. You're going to learn. It's going to be messy, but it's going to be great. And I'm holding on to the fact that in 5 years, I'll listen back to this podcast and be like, wow, look at how much I've learned even from then. So just bet on yourself and keep moving forward.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being on with us today. If people want to connect with you, follow along on your journey, see where you end up, and they can start today and watch you grow in 5 years, where should they be going to connect with you?
I think it's so funny to say. The first thing that comes to mind is Facebook. I don't know. I love Facebook. I don't use Facebook to share about my personal life, really. I really use it for work. So definitely my personal Facebook and social media, but I'm always happy to help and answer questions. So if somebody's listening and, you may be all the way out in California or New York or, Minnesota, wherever it is, I feel like I'm a pretty approachable person. So if somebody ever wants to have a conversation, my Facebook has all my phone number and contact information. So I'm really happy to help in any way, because I definitely wouldn't be here without the help of other mortgage brokers, help of other people in the industry. So I'm always glad to help and answer any questions I can.
I can attest she is very approachable. So
I try.
Well, thank you so much. All right, that wraps up today's episode. Big thanks to Laiken Charles for sharing her story with us today. So, if you're ready to stop waiting and start building your business, remember, you don't have to do it alone. At Licensing Store, we help brokers launch, grow, and stay compliant. If you found value in today's episode, be sure to like and share, and don't forget to subscribe so more mortgage professionals can join the conversation. Until next time, stay licensed, stay compliant, and stay approved AF.